Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and co-host of the Fear and Greed Business podcast. And as always, I'm with Canna Campbell, previously a financial planner, now the founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform covering podcasts, YouTube, books, Instagram and more. Canna, how are you going?
I'm good. How are you?
Going well, thank you. I've actually got some news this week. I mentioned there that I am a writer, and recently, very recently, my book has now gone on pre-sale, which is very, very exciting news. And I thought I'd bring it up in this episode because we're talking about buy now, pay later. And it is the worst, most kind of tenuous link I can possibly make. But if you buy it now, you can get it later when it's released. And it's actually quite a good Christmas present, the promise of a book that's coming in 3 months' time. God, they're going to hate you for it, but do it.
I know all about your book because I actually pre-ordered your book. Yes, I ordered it actually yesterday, How to Be Remembered. I'm very excited. It's good because it's going to force me to hurry up and read the 2 other books I'm reading at the moment so that when it arrives, and I'm a really slow reader for the record, I will be ready to jump right on in.
Oh, wonderful. I will even sign it if you like. Does that actually increase the value of a book if it's maybe if I
believe it does.
And if I sign it, dear highest bidder, signed Michael Thompson, that way you can sell it on eBay.
I like that. Like making money for the $1,000 project. Yes, please.
There we go. That's great. All right. And but yeah, I released that or pre-order in the last couple of weeks, and I have a website and Instagram and all this kind of stuff. It's michaelthompson.net.au. Just squeezing in a free plug there. What else have you been up to?
I had my first weekend away without children for Tom and I in almost 4 years.
Wow.
I know. Isn't that sad? It was great. But it was sad that it's taken us almost 4 years. Like I'm talking 3 years and 11 months to be precise, to have a weekend away. It was one of my girlfriend's 40th birthdays, and she invited everyone to, I think it's called Halcyon House in Cabarita
Up
Beach.
on the north coast of New South Wales.
Yes, near, sort of on the cusp of the Gold Coast and Byron. And no children allowed. So we were forced to have...
oh no, what a pity. Kids, you have to stay home.
It did have to cost a lot of money to keep our kids at home, but... that was the first time, like, we sat on a plane together without children. We only had, one piece of luggage each. It was fantastic. It was so nice. So hopefully we will not be waiting another 3 years and 11 months to do this again, but it was fantastic and amazing food there.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's just, isn't it? We had a very similar thing recently where we had our first weekend away in a couple of years without the kids. And it is amazing how much you just come back kind of refreshed, but also how keen you are just to get back as well and see the kids. Like, you're like, oh, this is great. We're gonna love our time away, and you get about kind of 3 hours away, and you're like, kind of want to go back and see the kids now.
It's funny you say that because we actually changed our flights to fly home earlier so we could be with the kids quicker.
God, we're starting on an unusually sentimental note today, isn't it? It's quite pleasant. Now, we're talking about buy now, pay later, as I mentioned before, and so I want to kind of get your thoughts on how this all works, kind of where some of the risks are, whether it can be useful in terms of kind of managing your finances, whether it's a tool that can be used or whether it is a gimmick kind of thing. But before we do that, we do need to mention that anything we are talking about today is general in nature. It is not personal, investment, strategic, or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only, which is pretty important in this kind of environment because buy now, pay later is something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. So education is really key.
Absolutely. We don't know anything about your financial situation, your financial goals, your deadlines, or even your risk profile. So should anything be of interest to you that we're talking about and you think, should I be going and doing something like that? That is when you must go and talk to a financial planner and ask them for personal advice that's actually based on your financial situation, your deadline, and your goals.
All right. Buy now, pay later. It has boomed.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly in Australia in the last few years. There's been a lot of operators start up here that have then kind of moved overseas and kind of Afterpay is a fantastic example of that, becoming one of the biggest operators in the world and based right here in Australia. And it seems pretty kind of timely that we're talking about this at Christmas because this is buy now, pay later, something that a lot of people would have kind of considered probably when they are looking at Christmas gifts. But you've got other providers like kind of Zip and Klarna, kind of even I think PayPal do a pay in 4 kind of option. Let's just start with the basics. How does buy now, pay later actually work?
So say you're shopping on a website and you see something you want to buy and you go, add it to the cart and then you go to checkout. If they have a relationship with one of those buy now, pay later providers, you literally can click that as an option and it takes a couple of minutes. You apply for it online and you're literally purchasing the item then and there on the spot. Now, the way most buy now, pay later providers work is you pay for that particular item in 4 fortnightly installments. So you actually get to take that item on the spot immediately, but you're taking up to 8 weeks to pay that item off in full. And you've got to sort of follow this formula of, scheduling in those repayments because they normally come out of they can come off a credit card, which is obviously not advisable. You should have it coming out of your savings account so that you actually are paying it off correctly and not creating, pushing the debt around.
You're using one form of debt to pay another.
Very, very dangerous if you're doing that. But it is how a lot of people are affording things at the moment.
So how then do you actually kind of get it? I know you said that it just takes a couple of minutes when you're signing up for one online. Do they do kind of credit checks on your ability to repay those 4 repayments?
It really depends on the provider that you're using. A lot of the more reputable ones do go and do what we call a soft credit check, which is it's not a full credit check, so they can't really see if someone's serviceability, which this is where it gets into a danger zone if people who are very, financially vulnerable and don't have the cash flow to actually pay for that item off, they don't know that person is actually not the right, demographic or client customer for that particular buy now, pay later. And this is where it can go terribly wrong. However, this may change with the rules and regulations.
Yeah, and I'll talk to you about those kind of rules and regulations and what kind of might be changing a little bit later. But just to kind of complete the image of how it all works, monthly or fortnightly repayments.
So you make your first one immediately on the spot, so the first 25%.
Yep.
Then you pay the next 25% in 2 weeks,
yep.
The following 25% in 2 weeks, and then the following 25% in 2 weeks. But you can actually pay your item off earlier at any time should you wish.
Okay. Fees? What fees are there? Are there any?
Generally speaking, no. You do obviously need to read the fine print because some may start charging you fees if you are late. But generally speaking, there is no interest and there are no fees.
And do you have to make those payments deliberately yourself or do they come as direct debits? I know you mentioned kind of credit cards. You could potentially use that, which would be a very risky thing to do. But are they kind of coming directly out of your account is it hands off?
Almost set and forget. Yes, it's a direct debit that comes out of your account. And some of these providers actually have a reminder thing that will send you a text message a few days to go, hey, don't forget, there's $100 coming out, next week or next day, just a reminder so you can stay on top of it. So it's really important that you have a budget and you stick to it and you factor in those fortnightly repayments should you choose to use buy now, pay later as one of your budgeting tools. I
remember it would have been 10 years ago, I reckon, that we bought a TV from Harvey Norman or one of those ones. And we did like those, how they advertise like 48 months interest free and you just kind of pay a little bit off each month. That kind of feels like almost the precursor to buy now, pay later. Where as long as you made those payments every month, there were no additional fees.
That's right. But the thing with that, and I remember as a child always seeing those ads for Harvey Norman, but if you were to go in the store and say, no, what if I pay cash up front? There was quite a big, the price of that television actually came down quite a bit.
Yeah.
But you had to actually say, look, I'm paying cash, I'm not interested in this offer. Because sometimes it was actually more, if they didn't have a better price and you were paying that same price, it actually made financial sense to pay it off in installments because at least you could earn interest on those savings in the meantime.
Are you this is completely off topic, but it's just kind of jogged my memory about kind of almost haggling over prices in, say, The Good Guys or Harvey Norman or something. Are you a good kind of haggler?
Yeah. I don't hold back. I haggled over a Bissell upholstery carpet cleaner.
Oh, aren't they great?
They are so good. I have 2 large dogs, 2 Labradors that molt a lot, and I have 3, let's be honest, messy, dirty children.
I just had this image of you actually using the Bissell to clean the dogs. I'm like, no, actually, it is to clean the furniture that the dogs have been on. Isn't it satisfying when you...
I mean, we get our carpet cleaned a lot, and I have to get the sofas cleaned a lot as well. Each time they come, it can be anywhere between $150 up to $600.
Yeah.
So having that to help spread out those when you need a professional to come in, it's a great tool to have. And we have, so stupid of me, but we have a cream-coloured sofa.
That feels like a rookie error.
Big time. It looks so good though. It looks so nice.
Was it purchased a long time ago, as in before kids?
No.
Or was it, so it was with kids. You knew how much kids spill stuff and you still bought a cream-coloured sofa.
I was pregnant with our third child,
yes.
and
I feel
we
little
were
to
getting
no
a puppy.
sympathy for you.
So, disaster. And the first night it arrived, I said to Tom, like, no food. He spills red wine and then hides it from me.
What, with a cushion just sitting right in the middle of the couch?
Pretty much, yes. And
odd.
then our 2-year-old at the time ate some raspberries and then sat on them. This is like within hours of the new sofa arriving.
Did Tom then try and blame the raspberry stain for the red wine as well? It's like, look how far this raspberry is spread. It's taken up.
Tom's pretty cheeky and mischievous. I can't remember. He did try, and I think he put a throw over it.
As though you were never going to move that throw.
I know. I was like, what were you thinking?
He should have glued it in place.
Well, I had to quickly get someone to come out and professionally clean it and Scotch guard it, hence why the investment in this upholstery.
Anyone who has used a Bissell kind of would just be going, oh, this is great. And so anyone who hasn't used one would just not know what they're missing out on. A tip from me is that we have one Bissell between about 4 households, because you don't
savvy, and they're big and bulky as well.
Yeah, because you don't actually need it that often. You might need it every month or something, and you just shift it around kind of between households, and everyone just buys their own kind of cleaning liquids that goes into it.
It's like the community book club.
Yes.
Community upholstery vacuum cleaner, but they do save money. But on that note, yes, I went into Harvey Norman and I said, the good guys have got it on at this price. And I was doing Frugal February, which is this challenge I do. And the guy was like, fair enough. He goes, and in fact, I'll beat it. And I saved, I think, $75.
Oh, well done.
Thank you.
That was that's a very big detour just then from Buy Now, Pay Later. No, I love talking about Bissells, clearly. And considering they don't actually advertise with us, they've got a lot of airtime today.
And Harvey Norman, hello.
Yeah, come on, guys. Here we go. Opportunity knocks. Now, Buy Now, Pay Later, the risk, because you mentioned credit cards and kind of potentially using credit card to make those payments. That just screams risk. But there's other risks involved here as well. And I was actually reading some research recently that kind of showed an alarmingly high number of people that when they get into trouble, not able to actually kind of make their payments on a Buy Now, Pay Later account, that they were opening a second or a third or a fourth account. And because there are so many providers and the credit checks are a little bit kind of loose, that they were able to do that, which just feels like that is just a spiral.
Is exactly what it is. And this is the problem. And that's when, to manage, say I go and buy 5 things from 5 different Buy Now, Pay Later providers, I've got to manage 4. For each purchase, there's 4 payments. So we've got 20 different direct debits coming out of my account. That is on top of my normal budget that I'm trying to adhere to. So that is just making life very, very stressful and very, very dangerous. And this is where things spiral out of control, because then the direct debits, bounce. Then there's payment fees. Then there might be late fees and interest. This is where things can very, very quickly go wrong. And this is when those are the people that should not be using Buy Now, Pay Later.
Is there the risk then that it kind of feels like play money, that it's not real money that you're using, that you're essentially just able to get everything for nothing up front, or it's 25% up front, that you could quickly get yourself in over your head because it doesn't feel like you're actually spending your own cash?
Well, that and the same thing could be said for a credit card as well.
Yeah.
And look, there are a lot of benefits to Buy Now, Pay Later. When Buy Now, Pay Later first came out, I was very anti it. And then I was talking to my staff, who are all millennials, and they really set the record straight as to how they use Buy Now, Pay Later. And they really educated me as to how they were using it, because lo and behold, I didn't know they were all using it. But they were using it in a very savvy way as a budgeting tool.
Okay. All right. I want to find out a little bit more about that, about some of the potential benefits and the way that it can be used as a tool, but we might come back and do that in a moment. All right. So buy now, pay later is what we're talking about today. We've kind of covered some of the risks, and I want to come back to that in a minute in terms of what to do if you do get yourself in over your head.
Because that's important.
But the way that at the moment it does sound very negative. You mentioned the millennials in your office. How were they using it as a budgeting tool?
Well, these staff members did not want a credit card. For them, a credit card was dangerous. Oh. They love that they could ration out their cash flow and use it as a budgeting tool.
Yeah.
And they would only have one purchase going at any time. Mm-hmm. And they were using it to sometimes also survive financially in bad times. They obviously had emergency money. But, for example, one of my staff members, Ella, smart girl, actually studying law, very responsible with her money. And she had to buy all her law books up front during the university holidays. Now, these law books are horrendously expensive. Some of them are like $180, $240.
Textbooks are insane.
Insane. And so she, with her money saved up, she purchased those books. Those books went missing in the mail. And she was panicking. She's like, I need do a lot of reading in these holidays before I start my first semester. Panicking. Anyway, she called up the publisher. They're like, sorry, we're not going to give you a refund until these books turn up. So she had to use buy now, pay later to buy all the new books. But she didn't have enough emergency money set aside. And this is a girl who's smart with money. She's responsible, but she's also living out of home, paying her way to study, trying to get through all the assignments, exams. She's doing her very, very best. So she couldn't get a refund on those books. It forked out, I think, like $800 or $900. So she used buy now, pay later to help replace those books. And, of course, eventually when those ones went missing, she sent them back, got a full refund, and was able to pay out the buy now, pay later.
They did turn up eventually.
Eventually, but she needed those books right then and there, and she lost a lot of time. So that was a way she used it as a fallback. And, yes, she probably should have had more emergency money, but sometimes you're just doing the best you can do, and that was a smart solution. And obviously she paid it off early because she eventually got the refund. Another story that someone shared with me, and again, people who use it in the right way can use it as a very powerful tool. And then when I say a smart way, they pay it off early. They only have one going at the same time. They only use one buy now, pay later provider. They're aware of the credit checks. They've done their research.
Yeah.
And that is when her and her husband desperately needed to upgrade their mobile phones. They'd had an iPhone. Both of them were really old and just starting to go. And they weren't people that kind of kept up with the Joneses and having to have the latest iPhone. They worked out it was better for them to go and buy a new mobile phone up front instead of going and signing up to a new contract and have like a SIM only, which is very, very savvy. So they used buy now, pay later to go and buy, and they didn't buy the latest iPhone. They used, whatever number it was at the time, to buy a replacement iPhone, and they had it completely paid off in 8 weeks and were still continuing on their very frugal and savvy SIM-only plan. And again, that actually made a lot of sense.
Okay. So there are certainly ways that it can be used.
Yeah.
And you would probably imagine that most people are using it fairly responsibly, which is why the industry has grown so much in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, really.
I think it really varies between the different providers because they have different ways in managing when things start to go wrong. And, you can very easily do your research as to which ones have the responsible process in place where they immediately stop the ability to use the buy now, pay later provider. They'll put them in touch with a financial counselor. They'll work with them to put a repayment plan in place.
Yeah, and that is then the next question of what do you do when it starts to get out of control? And the first thing, I suppose, is to realize that it is getting out of control, because a lot of people would kind of just put their heads in the sand, I suppose, and pretend.
Look, I think if you have to use buy now, pay later, as in you have to, not by choice, that's a red flag. This is probably not something for you. You need to start building up. You need to get better at managing your money and having a budget and building up emergency money. But look, if you find yourself, you've got in over your head, and it does easily happen, my first recommendation is to look at what you've purchased and go, all right, I've bought, for example, a new dress. If you haven't worn that dress, return that dress.
Yeah.
Because then that will immediately get rid of that payment structure for you immediately.
Yeah.
The next thing is...
And can you usually do that?
Assume it's not used. Yeah, you can refunds are perfectly fine through buy now, pay later. That's not a problem. Obviously, check the fine print, but most of them have a return policy in place.
Okay, so it would be pretty much subject to the normal returns policy of the retailer.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
The next thing is you've got to get on the phone and let them know you're in over your head and communicate, look, I've used this and that and bought this. I'm on a bit of a tight budget. I need help, so that they know not to let you use their product anymore. They can then work with you and put you on a payment plan. And obviously, you've got to agree to the terms of the payment plan. So if they come up with a payment plan that's actually not realistic, don't agree to it. Say, no, I actually still can't afford that. And then, of course, you've got to go back and start looking at the way you're managing money. You can't be doing this over and over again. This is not a way of living your life. And those are the people, if you've been burnt by buy now, pay later, don't use it. Just learn how to spend cash only and use a debit card. And there's this thing called, I think it's called the flinch. It's an economics, like psychology principle with money. And it was basically when you use cash to pay for something, it actually physically hurts. So you're less likely to buy things when you pay for things in cash. Whereas this is what I was saying about credit cards. It feels like play money. It's not real money. I can buy it now, think about it and worry about it later when it comes through. But all your other lifestyle expenses and living expenses are on top of that as well.
Do you think that's the downside of the cashless society then? Definitely. That we're not kind of appreciating the value of money and the fact that when you spend it, you actually have to have it?
I think we're not present when we tap, when we wave, when we just type in a number. I don't think we're as present to handing over cold hard cash. But that's just a mindset and a psychology. We can, I think, adjust that.
Yeah. Buy now, pay later is one of those things that I mentioned how quickly it's grown, and watching it from the outside, I haven't used it before, but it feels like it has grown so quickly that kind of the systems around it, the regulation, kind of didn't keep up with it in a way, that we've had companies that have kind of sprung up from nowhere within the last decade, and now the federal government is talking about the regulations required to really kind of put in place some consumer protections to make sure that it isn't quite so easy for people to get into trouble. What are we going to see?
Well, the Financial Services Minister, Stephen Jones, said he wanted buy now, pay later services to be treated like other credit providers under the Australian law. And that's fair enough, because there's an element of credit in here, and it can, when it goes wrong, impact someone's credit report. And that then has obviously repercussions when they want to go and borrow money, say to buy their first home. So that seems fair. So they're looking at obviously strengthening the code of conduct for buy now, pay later and including them as part of the Credit Act, but also upholding a requirement for buy now, pay later providers to actually do a more detailed credit check on customers before they use their products, including running suitability tests. So essentially go through a very similar processes to what you get when you go for a home loan or a credit card even. They actually need to do some proper research as to who you are, whether you can afford this, what your realistic living expenses are, so that you're not set up for failure if this is something that's not right for you. And I think this is a fantastic move.
Okay. All right. It is a big industry, and it has grown so much. And I think we've kind of had a pretty good guide to it today as to kind of how it all works. Really, in the end, it is something that you can apply for quite quickly in order to make a purchase. And you can take the goods with you at the time, 25% upfront, and then you pay the rest in kind of installments, fortnightly installments. Generally no fees unless you are late with your repayments. It is easy to access. So there is the risk then that people can get a little bit overexcited and have multiple kind of payments going all at once. And that if you are the kind of person who, I think this was really important what you said, that if you're the kind of person who needs it, really actually needs it, then it's probably not right for you because you are using it almost as a crutch instead of as a tool. Though it can be used as a tool for budgeting, and when it is used perhaps as an alternative to a credit card, then it might be able to be managed responsibly. But if you do get in over your head, you need to take quick action.
Immediate action, and just stop using it. It's not right for you. And see a financial counsellor if that's what's needed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really kind of good advice. Just seek help.
Exactly.
When you do need it. All right. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember, please hit subscribe, hit follow, leave us a review, leave us a 5-star rating.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, we love 5 stars. Next week, we are talking all about New Year's resolutions. I'm actually really excited about that one because it is kind of pretty close to New Year's Eve. And so it's time to kind of stop and take stock and think about where we're going for the next year. So do not miss that one. It'll be fun.
And on that note of New Year's resolutions, if you are serious about 2023 being your best financial year ever, make sure you are following me on Instagram at SugarMamaTV, because this is where I provide you with all of the sticker tap links to all of our podcasts the moment they go live. It's also the best way to get in contact with me at SugarMamaTV.
And if you're very serious about getting a really good book as well, that is available for pre-order now, you can follow me as well, Michael Thompson, author. Just thought I'd squeeze that one in there as well. But do not miss next week, all about New Year's resolutions.